Five seconds of silence for Jesse.
Because she's dead, right?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of the Magus Brothers podcast. I am Tyler, and with me always is the lovely...
What up, y'all? I'm Feyerbrand, and thank you for joining us on another episode. Can't believe it's already episode 11, which actually coincides with Final Fantasy 11. Go figure. I guess we're doing this now. This is becoming a thing. But Final Fantasy 11, weird game. More on that probably in a year. Tyler, what do we got going on today?
We are actually joined by a guest. His name is Kutakuma, and we've kind of done a little lead up to this, and we are going to be discussing the positive, the lovely side for everyone who loves Remake and get his take. Kuta, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Kutakuma. I am the primary voiceover for the Cosmo Observatory. So we are a Final Fantasy VII Remake analysis channel on YouTube, and we've got our own Discord, our own Twitter, and all those kind of fun things. Basically, we are led by the awesome and insanely big-brained Vizuvizat, who has amazing theories and crazy insight on what's going on with Remake. And so I pretty much just read his scripts and deliver the message from him to you. And hopefully you guys enjoy that.
We do. Cosmo Canyon Observatory and his breakdowns were actually some of the first ones I watched post playing Remake myself. I found Viz through the Reunion podcast and Kai. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
So, Kuta, before we dive into the Remake itself and start breaking things down, tell us a little bit about your history with Final Fantasy, and more specifically, Final Fantasy VII.
Well, Final Fantasy VII, like many people, was my first Final Fantasy game, which, at least the first one that I distinctively remember playing and finishing for sure. I have like a vague memory of playing Final Fantasy IV at my cousin's house and not knowing what it was, but 7 was the first one that I actually sought out and played and completed. I remember I was originally not super into it. I wasn't super interested, but my older sister was like, "Oh, this looks so cool, and you should really try it." And I was like, "Okay." So she convinced me to rent it. And then I rented it, and I couldn't beat the guard scorpion because I was impatient, and was like, "Oh, I'm trying to attack while the tail's up," and I didn't get it. So I was like, "Okay, I don't want this game." And then I watched her boyfriend at the time or something, and he beat it, and then I was like, "Wait a minute, this is doable. I can totally do this. I love this." And so then I started playing it more and more and more, and got really attached to the characters because, you name them after your friends. And I was one of those kids who, didn't use default names at the beginning. Yeah, so I feel like half of the story probably went way over my head when I played it. But there was just something about the characters and the environments. And gosh, when it came out, it was the most graphically amazing thing you've ever seen in your day. So you just get sucked in. And then naturally, I as soon as I fell in love with 7, 8 came out shortly after, and I fell in love with that one. And then 9 came out, and I played that one. And I worked my way through. And I think by the time I finished 10, I was curious enough about the previous ones. And that was when Anthologies and Chronicles and Origins was coming out. And so I've played through almost all of the numbered games, and a lot of the spin-offs. I got really attached to Chocobo Racing and Final Fantasy Tactics. Those were really big ones for me. Oh man,
you're speaking player's language there. I have not played Tactics yet.
It's so good. I hate him for it.
It's really good. But you're probably not gonna like me because I only ever played with Game Shark.
Dude, as a kid, Game Shark was my best friend. That's how I beat all my games as a kid. There's no shame.
I've wanted to go back and try to play Tactics again, as an adult, now that I actually understand numbers and gameplay mechanics. But I'm terrified because as much as I love games, I'm actually not that great at playing them. So
Wow, I know exactly what you're saying.
There's nothing wrong with that.
It makes me a terrible streamer. Why are we watching this terrible person playing video games?
Same. I'm currently streaming as well. I stream on Twitch, and I'm going through Final Fantasy X. One of my big goals for my stream channel is to get the platinum trophy for all of the numbered Final Fantasy games. And the only reason why I don't want to extend it beyond numbered Final Fantasies is because I know that I will not ever be able to get good enough at Dissidia NT to ever get that platinum.
Oh, dude. I'm actually doing something exactly the same. I'm calling it the Final Fantasy Odyssey. And
That's
it's
awesome.
me going through getting all the platinums, except I'm doing every Final Fantasy except Dissidia as well, because no thank you.
I don't understand.
Dude, I totally
what were they thinking? The trophies in that game are so
awful.
stupid.
They're terrible. I looked at the trophy list. I'm like, yeah, delete off my list. Gone.
Yeah. Have you gotten to 10 yet?
Yeah, I have the platinum for 10.
Okay. I'm working my way. I just at the Chocobo race one, and that was a 4-hour stream. And oh my God, sorry, this is going off tangent a little bit, but
That's
We love tangents. We're here for it.
Yeah. I got within the first 30 minutes, 40 minutes of my stream, I got 0.0.2.
Oh my goodness.
Then it took me another 3 hours to finally beat it. And that's partly because I'm not actually good at it, but also because the RNG is just terrible.
No,
and it was just
that mini game is not a reflection of anybody's skill. It is 98% luck and 2% is knowing the optimal route. Other than that, it's RNG. That mini game.
I hate that mini game, and Feyer knows that I have a history with that mini game.
Oh, no.
That is anyway.
No, we gotta say it because it's funny.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Okay, I'm gonna do the story, and then we're gonna get back on the track.
Yeah. Sorry.
Years ago, I don't know how many back it was at this point, but years ago, I was trying to I don't want to say I was 100%ing the game, but I was definitely going for the ultimate weapons, and I struggled really, really hard doing that. Getting the 0.0 because it's difficult, but I did it and was like, yes, okay, I'm going to go immediately save. And one of the first encounters I ran to getting to a save point was a Marlboro, and it just wrecked me, and I hadn't saved, had to redo it all. So that was the first thing, and that was just super sad. And then in the last year, I did it, didn't save.
No.
Something happened with the console. So I'm really bad about
you saved over your save.
That's what I did. I saved over it with another save file or something like that, and I had to redo it again. And so anytime I think about that game or having to go redo that, I already have anxiety because of these past things. That's the worst.
I had to do that with the Albed primers because you can miss them in home. And I forgot about that. And so then I had to revert to an old save pile, which was basically right after you leave Besaid. So it's I had to play the whole game all over again just for 3 freaking Albed primers.
I think that's what Tyler was doing when he saved over his master save, was trying to get those Albed primers.
All right, hold on. God. Just everybody, this episode has turned into a Final Fantasy X grievance episode. We are not talking about the remake. No,
we're here to cry that you can't skip cutscenes in that game. What the heck?
It's fine.
Okay. Anyway, so turning this beast around back to remake, because that's really why we're here. So
is it?
Yes, it is. It is. Kuta, we are here to talk about your love for the Final Fantasy VII remake because as listeners and you probably know, it was a divisive title. There were a lot of reasons it was divisive. People either outright hated it, did not. They just weren't super impressed by it. And then there was people who loved it. I, not initially, was somebody who, I don't want to say I hated it, but I felt betrayed by the ending and was hurt and was upset. And it took me a little bit of time. And since then, I love it. And it's probably one of my favorite video games of all time. Feyer is a little bit more, he doesn't hate it. He's a little bit more lukewarm about it, leaning into the positivity, but I don't know that he is as glowingly in love with it as I am.
No, it depends on the day for me, how I feel about it.
Depends.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Feyerbrand.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yes. Got it in first.
Dang it.
Okay. Anyway, so Kuta,
Yes.
Tell us, we're going to break this into chunks. Tell us
Okay.
about, before we dive into the graphics, just your overall takeaway from the game and how you felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the game that we wanted for, God, years, you know? Like, I mean, ever since I can't even remember what came first, but I feel like like Advent Children came and then it was the PS3 tech demo. Is that correct?
I think so. I'd have to go back and look the dates, but I think
I'm pretty
that's right.
sure you're right.
Yeah, but I feel like ever since Advent Children was even like hinted at, like that was like, oh my God, like what could they do with this game? Like if they redid it, like I want to see it in PS2 graphics. I want to see it in PS3 graphics. You know, it's like, oh my God, there's been so much hype for however many years than that was, that I've wanted this game. And, you know, there are all the rumors and all of the silly, like, you know, fake leaks and like whatever of like, it's coming, they're going to do it. And all this build up. And I remember when they announced it in at E3, like when it finally, the real thing, they teased it. Like it was just like I just like sat in like silence, like it was I was at like an E3 party with my friends, and I just was like I don't know, I like sunk into myself, like just in like awe, like for the entire rest of the show, where I was like just like, oh my God, it's finally happening, and like this is real, and it looked great. And you know, I mean, we saw Cloud's back and that was about it, but it was like, oh my God, what is this going to be? And then the PSX experience thing came out, and you look at it now and you're like, oh God, I'm so glad that that's not what we actually got. But like at the time, it was like everything. Like it looked, you know, high energy and like intense, and like, oh my God, they're actually talking, and like, oh my gosh, like Biggs and Jesse, and like, like it was like so hype and so exciting, right? And then the game actually comes out, and like, it's just, I don't know, it was everything that I needed it to be. And I think that part of that was like, it came out like right as kind of like the pandemic was starting. So like, I got to like super dive into it. Like I took time off work and then, you know, so like, I think I probably took like a week off work just so I could just sleep, eat, and play Final Fantasy VII Remake.
A dream.
Yeah. Yes. But leading up to that, I had gone to like KupoCon, and then KupoCon had like a launch party. So it was like I was like living in the hype of it and like obsessing over Cosmo Canyon Observatory videos, because this was before I was doing the voiceover for it. And like it was just, I don't know, everything about it, like, because there was like that intrigue of like, well, what's happening, like what, like who is this guy on the motorcycle, like why is Sephiroth here, like oh my gosh, like all of these like crazy hints that they did in the trailers. But like I just wanted to find out. And like, but then I also saw like, you know, the moments that you remember in the game, and Midgar was always my favorite portion of the game, so I'm a little biased about part one. But I don't know, but then just it came out and it was just everything I wanted. Like I was a bit worried about the battle system, but I got to try the battle system at the demo when it was at PAX West, and like that like 15-minute just getting to the Scorpion Sentinel was like, that just confirmed my hype, where I was like, I need to play this. And then I played the demo and it's like, oh my God, like I just remember like playing through for the first time, and there were just moments of just like pure, like, I don't know, like not callback to my childhood, but it was just like, this is exactly what I remember. And like, it doesn't make sense, because you look back at the original PS1 version, and it's like, there's no way that as a kid you saw this, but like, it was exactly what I remembered. And then there were still moments where it's like, wait, that was a twist. And like, where are they taking this? Like, oh, and then like, oh my gosh, like they're actually expanding this part of the story. And like, oh, I feel so much more connected to Avalanche and to like the Turks and stuff. And I don't know. It felt like it was everything it needed to be, in my opinion.
So let's dive into that. Let's break it down and talk about the graphics.
Yes.
How did you feel about the graphics? Now, it sounds like you play video games far more than I do, but how did you feel about the graphics once we finally got it?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. Like I was saying, like with the very first like PlayStation Experience trailer, like you compare them, it's like night and day. Like, and I would have been satisfied with that, like probably. But after seeing it now, like the graphics, and especially now with like intergrade, like holy moly, it's beautiful. And then it's like I mentioned, like I feel like it looks exactly like how I pictured it as a kid. I remember when the trailer for Intermission came out for the first time, when Yuffie was shown for the first time. Took me a minute after watching the trailer to realize that we hadn't seen Yuffie yet, because that was exactly the image in my mind, if that makes any sense. It was just like I don't know. She just was like, it's perfect, you know?
I did not. I just wanted to pause for a second. Like when we got the trailer, I think it was at a State of Play for for Intermission, and that it was like, I figured it was going to get a PS5 upgrade. Getting the DLC, like I hadn't heard rumors about DLC or anything like that. And like just seeing that trailer with Yuffie and then seeing all that, I think I was more surprised by that than when we finally got a full trailer for Remake, because I knew Remake was coming when they announced it at E3, and then we finally got a full trailer. It was like, this is great. But I was just floored. I did not expect DLC. I thought we weren't going to see anything next until part 2. And then that Yuffie trailer happened and it blew me away. I was just like, oh my God, this is happening.
Well, I think Square had even come out and said, we're not planning any DLC. So it kind of really shut everyone's expectations down. Now, obviously, at that time, they weren't planning it, but they still created it, you know. Wordplay, words matter, but it just made it even bigger shock. Because at least when, you know, we first saw the very first trailer of 7 not the very first, but the first, like, full one when they, you know, it was like 9 months before the release, we had known it was coming because of that previous trailer, like 3 years before that.
I did get really, really excited with that, like, starting the marketing again trailer, the one from the PlayStation experience, because I am if you watch Cosmo and Observatory, you know I'm like the biggest Aerith stan in the world. So not really, but
I love her.
Oh no,
she's
Fayer does not love her, but I love her.
Aerith is like my favorite character in all of video game history. And so obviously she was shown off in that trailer, and it was just like, like this. And it's crazy because like her model changed like a little bit, like they changed her face a little bit since that trailer. And I remember like being really excited because I thought that she looked more like mature in a weird way. Like I don't think that's necessarily the right word, but like I don't know, like I was really happy because I felt like she looked like she wasn't like, I feel like in Advent Children and in like Crisis Core and in all this stuff, they really like they really went hard on like the motherly, gentle, innocent brand and, you know, like image of her. And she was always super sassy. And I felt like they kind of were showing that a little bit in that trailer. And then they fully delivered on that in the actual game.
Yeah, because so one of the things we've talked about before on the podcast is that, and it's completely understandable, how Cloud is presented in Advent Children with his depression, struggling with his guilt, and the fact that he's, you know, dying. Like Cloud comes off a very different way than how he came off in OG7, especially, you know, before he knows who he is, and then even after he knows who he is. And a lot of additional media after Advent Children, I'm going to call it Sad Cloud. We got this sad Cloud, like in Kingdom Hearts and a lot of other things, and that kind of became what we saw of Cloud. And I had never really thought about it, but that's kind of what happened with Aerith. Like Aerith in OG7 is flirty and sassy and like very forward, and then you get Advent Children and you get this whole motherly, ethereal kind of, you know, a being of light type vibe where she's just like not human at that point whenever she's kind of introduced. But then, you know, we get to Remake and we get that sassy, forward, flirty, like she's getting dirty, you know, hitting somebody with a folding chair and stuff like that. You know, like we just got like, it was like that reaffirmation of like, oh, there's more to these characters. And I didn't connect that with Aerith until you said that.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And I feel like part of that too was, you know, like I feel like voice direction is a huge part of that too. Like I can't watch Advent Children in English because they did not do good things for directing Mina Savari. Like you listen to the Japanese voice actress and Maya Sakamoto, and she is like, you know, she's got that little sass in her giggle, and she's got like a little bit of character. And then like I feel like with Mina Savari that they were just really focusing on like the pitch and matching that like that high pitched serene like sound, I guess. And you can hear that a lot in Kingdom Hearts as well. And that always drove me crazy because I was like, this isn't the Aerith that I love, and Aerith is like my favorite. So it was I don't know. Brianna White kills it though. Like she's so good.
Yeah, the entire voice cast
Oh my
for
God.
Remake is good, but yeah, Brianna
Yeah.
White really nailed Aerith. So yeah, like I thought it was seeing the characters brought to life and the way the graphics were done, because I've said it before, I don't play a ton of games, but for me, Remake was graphically the strongest, most amazing game I have ever played. Since
I'm
then,
very biased, but I think it's true.
Since then, and it's hard to be objective, right? Because I'm seeing these characters that I've loved for, however long, 20 years, running around in full CG animation, doing all of these great and wonderful things, looking fantastic and stuff like that. And since then I've played like the PS5 Spider-Mans, and like I've seen like a little bit different type of graphics, and I'm like, okay, like, Final Fantasy VII Remake may not necessarily be the cream of the absolute crop, but then we got that PS5 upgrade, and I was just like, all right, like this is super good. And we talked with Nader this last episode, and Nader pointed out a couple of things where like the textures are very, like, even with the PS5 upgrade, like the textures on certain places are not up to snuff. Like even like the vending machines, when you go up, if you look at the text on them, they're still like super, super pixelated. And I didn't really catch that. So like I probably was just running around with like rose tinted glasses everywhere. And that's fine. I love the game.
Yeah, that was definitely me. People complain about the doors, and I was like, what are you even talking about? And I had to like look it up and like, oh wait, okay, I can see it now that you pointed out, but I played the game like twice and didn't notice. So clearly it wasn't a big deal for me. I was so blinded by everything else being beautiful.
Yeah, I think the only time I truly noticed like low textures, or whatever the term is like when you're
Playful.
I don't think it was plateful. I think it's even before that, when you're like turning the lights off to get to the Sector 5 reactor, you look down and you see like the slums down there. Like that was the only time I noticed it.
That's fair. Yeah, that one I think I noticed like a little bit, but it wasn't I didn't spend too much time looking at it. I'm scared of heights, so I was like, I don't really want to look down. But yeah, I didn't focus on that too hard. But the one for me was Platefall. That was the one time that I was like, okay, like they probably could have, sharpened this up a little bit. And I think the only reason why I really noticed it is because there's like a voice line where it's like, you'll never forget this view. And so I was like, ooh, let me look. And then
you're
I was
like,
oh, you're right. I won't forget it, but for the wrong reason.
I don't think I've played the PS5 graphic upgrade like all the way for actual Remake. So I don't know if they like crisped that up or anything, but I hope they did.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they show it in the trailer too, like when they're showing the upgrade, because so I think they knew like this is one of the areas where people were, complaining about it. So.
All right. So pivoting away from graphics, let's talk about, and I actually want to touch on this because you had even mentioned it yourself with the combat, but the gameplay itself, which is a all-encompassing, term, but like level design, the gameplay, the combat, the materia system, weapon upgrades. Like, how did you feel about all of these? Because a lot of those were new systems that got added in. The materia worked pretty similar to the way it did, but they made changes to it. They had weapon upgrades on top of all of this now. Like, how did you feel about all of those things?
I mean, I thought it was wonderful. Like, I love the idea of the weapon upgrades because, like, the Buster Sword is so iconic that, like, everyone's going to want to play with it. So, like, weapon upgrade was such a great way to make it relevant throughout the entire story. And, like, so you can upgrade your whatever weapon you like visually or, stat-wise, because they were all different. But, like, and play with that. And just because you found a new weapon doesn't mean that it's better automatically. Because I feel like in OG, like you get a new weapon for Cloud in Wall Market, and like then you never look back at the Buster Sword unless you are like doing a challenge run or something. And that was such an ingenious way of making that still relevant. And then on top of that, the abilities that you get from the weapons, but really felt like pulling like the best element of Final Fantasy IX, in my opinion, where you like are learning the moves from your equipment and then retaining that even after you switch weapons, like if you max out the proficiency. And like that is awesome. I'm a huge completionist, so like I want to have those things where it's like, yeah, like let me master this, and then I feel like I've accomplished something. And that was not only not only did it provide those cool abilities and make you feel like you had to or want to use the different weapons at least once and see what they were, but it also allowed them to create new moves that made each character different. And that's something that I think OG7 was really missing, is that like, yes, everybody has different base stats, and like I'm sure that there is an actual like OP team or something that like there is actually a meta for characters in the game, but like outside of their limit breaks, like you could basically outfit every character to perform nearly the same. At least I'd assume. It was always just, at least how I played, was always just what characters do I like the best. And Remake really like challenged that mentality. Like I mean, not only were you kind of like, story dictated into having certain parties, but it's like there was I couldn't just play with Aerith when I got her in my team. Like I certainly tried, but there were, there were fights where it's like, no, like I want to switch over to Tifa because Tifa can really bump up their stagger gauge. And like, it was like there was individuality to each of the characters that these extra moves that they learned from their weapons made. And so it wasn't just about materia, but it was also about the characters as individuals, which I feel like got you to really appreciate each character as an individual. And it was, I don't know, really, really well done.
I was going to say that's one of the things when I think about part 2 and the subsequent things that are going to be coming, I really want that same diversity with all of the other characters with playstyles and combats, and we got to see how even Yuffie is going to be very, very different.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want it to be so different that like when you start to min-max and go like, oh, I need party makeups for this fight, and we do get that freedom to choose who our party is going to be. I don't want to end up in this position where it's like, oh, well, you can't beat this fight without these certain people. I hope they do a really good job of doing enough overlap to where it's not just Tifa who can do this amazing stagger gauge buildup, but like maybe another character can do that. I hope it gets really balanced really well, because I want everybody to be able to play with the party they want without feeling like they are forced to use other characters that you need to use to beat a fight.
Well, I think that's going to come with them fleshing this battle system out and fine-tuning it even more, because for exact reasons like you said, when you're trying to build that stagger, your go-to is Tifa. Or if there's air combat, like Yuffie's air combat was top tier, even though she still didn't have a jump button. She just threw her weapon instead. And honestly, I am very much on the stance that this combat system missed its mark and they need to rework it going forward. Yeah, I don't like it at all. There's not a single thing about it I like.
Oh my God. It's probably like my favorite combat. I feel like it blended real time, like, I don't know, what is it? It's not real time, but like
ATB?
Kind of like it blend like action combat with turn-based like so well. I don't know. It feels so natural to me, I guess. Like I get it, and it clicks really well instantly. Of like, okay, like like you've got your time in the battle at the beginning to build up your ATB gauge, and you want to avoid getting hit, but also deal in some damage, and like really like try to build up that ATB, and then switch over to another character to build up their ATB, and then really deal some damage when multiple people have ATB bars. And like, I don't know, like it just, how material really impacted the ATB bar stuff, like that was really cool to me too. Like, I don't know, I just feel like it's this perfect mix of like strategy, but also thinking on your feet. And I loved it. Like it's not so immediate and like responsive. Like you don't have to like, frame count to perfect dodge and stuff like that. Like Kingdom Hearts and stuff. Like I know like you have to do so much like where you like memorize frames and such. And I could never do that. Like I would never want to do that. Also, I don't want something where I just, mash X the whole time. And I feel like this was such a perfect blend of those two.
And like, I think they're on the right track, because, action games where you build up a resource to expend later, that, that's a pretty common thing. They just kind of added in that whole, time stops with the wait system or whatever. It freezes so you can select your actions a little bit more carefully and more thought out. However, I think they need to put in that, frame perfect dodging as well. Not take anything away from what is already there, but add it in as well for the people who prefer that, because that's what I like. I would rather time my dodge perfect. I could never dodge through an attack with iframes, or that once I started getting hit, if it was like within a combo, I couldn't then put my guard up. I was basically subjected to that entire combo and I'd had to wait it out to recover. And it just like one mistake could punish you. And like your characters took a lot of damage.
Well, that was the beauty of like a party-based system, is if you got one character stuck in a combo, you could get them out of it with the other character.
Yeah, but I don't want to play the other character.
See, but I think that's why I like it so much. Is one of my big things with Final Fantasy is I've always liked like the party dynamic. That has always been my go-to, and I like for all of it. And I think that's why I struggle with being hyped for 16 as of right now, just because we don't know if there's going to be a party system, and that scares me. I don't really care for game. I got really, really mad with 12 when it first came out, because it was like, oh, like you pretty much only control one character. And I know that's not true, and I haven't played Zodiac Age, so I don't know how they've changed that. But I've heard it got better. But I got really upset with that. And then 13 like doubled down on it, where you only control the one character. And it was like, oh, I was so annoyed about that. And I do think 13 gets a lot of hate that it shouldn't. Like it's not actually a bad game. But I really, really like the idea of teamwork and collaboration and cooperation. So I was ecstatic when we saw synergized attacks in intermission. But like I cannot wait to see where those go. But yeah, I don't want to play a game where I'm only controlling one character. I want to
see. I agree with you, but from a different perspective. I also love that teamwork and that collaboration, but I want it to where they're supporting the one character that I like the best. So they're going to be my healer. They're going to buff me. They're going to debuff the enemy while I have my one characters going around the one that's actually dishing out the damage. I want everybody else to be support. So I feel the same, just a different perspective.
I feel like with that though, like with the way that they did it now, like it's really forcing you to not get attached to just one character. Like because you're controlling all of them, like you feel like a connection with them more. At least in my
that's what the story's for, though.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you typically get more attached to a protagonist, and this way, by being able and like in a sense, like forced to control the different characters, like they all become a protagonist a little bit more than they did in like OG. And I think that was one of the moments that I really loved in Remake, were those sections where you didn't play as Cloud, where it was like, oh, like we get to see what Aerith did, when Cloud and Tifa were going up the pillar. And
I loved that part. I thought that part was tight.
It was so cool. And like...
And not even just that part too, because like the Barrett edition where you're controlling Barrett down in Deep Ground, like that obviously wasn't even in OG at all. But I loved being like, oh, like now we're controlling another character completely, even outside of combat. Like I thought it was cool to do it in a story sense.
I agree. I freaked out because the first character that you control besides Cloud is Aerith, and it's only for a moment in Wall Market where like after he has the hand massage, and I was like, wait a minute. Am I playing as Aerith? And I like literally like stopped for like, I don't even know, like 20 minutes, just like freaking out, like, oh my God, like walking around. And I was like, I don't want this to end because I don't want to continue this section because I'm controlling Aerith and I don't know how long this is going to last. But it was so like, and then you got to play as everybody and it was, oh my gosh, it was so cool. And I cannot wait to play as Red 13 in part 2 because that's going to happen. And oh man, that's going to be amazing.
Even just seeing how Nanaki moved in the drum, like running across the walls and seeing how agile he was, even in the cutscenes chasing after Hojo. Like I am very, very excited to control Nanaki and see how his combat is, to see how he moves across the battlefield. I'm hoping he's as nimble as Yuffie felt when you controlled Yuffie. It's going to be. I think of all the characters. And I don't know if we're going to get to Vincent in part 2 because I don't know how long it's going to be.
Yeah.
But Red and Vincent, I am looking forward to controlling the most.
I am actually like, this is a very controversial opinion, I think, but I think I'm almost most excited to see what they do with Ket Shi or Kate Sith.
From an intellectual standpoint, I am very, very curious and excited to see what they're going to do, because we already even got to see that little snippet. We got to see Reeve more than we have before. And we got to see that little snippet up on during Platefall. And so like there's a lot there that did not get addressed with Reeve and with Ket Shi in the OG, because I mean, diving into that on a tangent, you know, the fact that like there's a mole within Shinra who's helping Shinra, but also trying to help you, and Reeve does really care about the people of Midgar and the future of that city, and doesn't want the world to end, but is struggling and juggling these two different lives and trying to help the party, and us seeing things from his perspective, like because Ket Shi is so goofy in the OG, and because he's just kind of just like an oddball that's always lying, like it doesn't really come through the best. And I can't wait to see the improvements, even just from a narrative standpoint, we get there, because that is a very rich story vein that I feel like was not tapped very well in OG.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I've heard that part of that is just due to stuff being lost in translation.
There's so much of that.
But I agree. There's like, I think so many people don't like Ket Shi as a character, and I think part of that is just because like that story was untapped as much as it should have been, and they're already hinting and showing that like there's so much potential there, and you know, only people who played OG really can pick up on that right now. But like, oh god, it's just so good.
So aside from that, let's talk about a little bit about like Midgar, like level design, stuff like that. Like you said, Midgar was your favorite section, so you're going to come off as biased, but that's okay. Yeah. We're here to be biased. What did you think about Midgar coming to life the way that it did? One of my big things with Midgar was that I, based off of the marketing leading up to it, thought we were going to see more of Midgar. Yeah, I didn't expect like a full-on GTA open city, but kind of to a degree I did expect that. But like really, we didn't see a whole lot of anything new aside from going up onto the plate with Jesse and then some deep ground. But it looked gorgeous. I just didn't see as much of it as I wanted to.
I mean, yeah, I think that like that's kind of inevitable. Like, you know, of course, I want to see the entire city. Yeah, absolutely. But I feel like the way they presented it, like the way that the story flowed, like I feel like it made sense why we saw what we saw. I know I felt like there were so many areas where it was like, yeah, this is exactly what I remember. And this is, you know, just like they nailed this section so perfectly. And then there are others where it's like, oh my God, like they took what we saw originally and amplified it to like 700. And like the wall market was like, and Honeybee Inn was like absolutely, I was really worried about how they were going to handle it originally. That is so iconic, like, and like iconic back then, but like I feel like they just amplified it like for the better with how they handled it. And like it was still modern, and it was still like accepting and inclusive, everything that it needed to be. When in the past, like, you know, you go back and play the old one now, it's a little, you know, like, oh, I don't, that's okay, you know, like maybe. But now it, like the way they handled it, like it fit in so well with the story. And like it was so like showy and awesome in the segment where Cloud dances, like, oh my God, that was such a fun and surprising mini game. And then the fact that all of them have 3 different dresses, like, oh, that was just everything. And I know we're not talking about the actual locations right now. Sorry, I got off on that tangent. But
as we do.
Yeah. But like even just visually, like Wall Market, like I got lost in there because like there's so many crazy turns and alleys, and it was like,
dude, I still get lost in Wall Market. I have a hard time navigating Wall Market whenever I'm back in there. I'm like opening the map and going, okay, I need to, how do I get here?
But like I love that because that feels really immersive because it doesn't change. Like, you know, it's there, it's just set, and that's just the city. But like it's so easy to get lost in there because of the hustle and the bustle and like the crazy nature of how and why it was built. Like it just fits. And I think One of the other things about like level design that like really stood out to me, and I have a love-hate relationship with it now, is the moving arm hand things. Like when I first got it, when I first played there, I loved it. I was like, this is like literally they took one thing that was, just a part of the scenery in one screen and like fleshed it out. Like it gave it a purpose and it gave it a reason. And like, oh my God, like who doesn't remember the hand in that one screen? Like, oh my God, perfect throwback. But then the fact that you have to do it like, 20 million times to get all the dresses, and it's so slow. Like
I feel this speaks to me because through talking about Remake as much as we have on this podcast for like the last 2 months, and then talking with Nader and such, there are a lot of things in the game where you do it the first time and it's fun. But there are a lot of things that when you do it for subsequent playthroughs to get dresses for platinum trophies, or if you mess up the decisions for getting dresses and you have to do things way more because you're inefficient, and I'm speaking to myself right now, there's things that bog down the replayability. And like, unfortunately, like they can't really just, I mean, maybe they could, but like, there's no feature to just be like, I want to skip this puzzle,
Right.
But it's like, that speaks to me. It's like that every time I have to get to that part and do that hand puzzle, or, Fayer talks about like the parts in the game where it like forces you to walk. To like make you see something, and you're just like, this is like the third time I've done this. Please just let me go. It's like Final Fantasy X all over again, where he's like, I just want to skip this cutscene. I've played this game 10 times. I'm doing this for like a platinum run or something. Like, I just want to skip these things.
Those parts didn't bother me too much. I think partially because like they're usually like in the heat of a story moment, and so it's like, okay, like you just get really into it. But also like that's a really great way for game developers to hide loading and stuff behind the scenes. And so I kind of have like, okay, like I know what's going on, and like, okay, like do your thing. And so I don't know, it's like when like with like Mass Effect, like when you're taking an elevator, like it's not actually because they want you to ride an elevator, it's just because they're loading the next segment. And like that's why they do like the slowdown segments. And so like it makes sense. And like since I've learned that fact, I have a lot more patience with those moments. But
yeah, I always was under the understanding that that's what was going on to a certain degree. I am curious when they start, because the intermission Yuffie chapters were done for the PS5, but they had also just got their hands on it, and they were using and working with established groundwork that Remake had laid before it. So I'm curious to see what that will look like with subsequent parts. Because I'm not as negative about like parts where it's like, oh, you have to slow down to walk to see something or for a story element, but puzzles like that arm puzzle where you have to do it on subsequent playthroughs many times to do things like dresses and stuff like that for play logs and stuff, they do feel especially punishing. And that's not to say I don't want mini games, but there are certain ones like that. It's like, maybe don't put the arms there in this spot where I have to redo this chapter a lot for dresses. Like maybe you should have gone in a different spot.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that, like, even the Yuffie content really addressed that, like, really well, because I feel like one of the other mini games that really frustrated me was the break the boxes, and that's completely optional. And you don't, you don't have to do that at all. And
that's a good point.
Either. So, like, you get some really cool stuff if you do it, but you don't have to. You do for the platinum. So people who are super dedicated and want that, like, you have to do it. But and the Yuffie one, you have to perfect it, which was annoying.
Oh my God, yes. I think we talked about that.
But it's all optional. And I think that I agree with you. I don't think that mini games and stuff like that should be, but also, I guess, like now that I'm thinking about it and saying this out loud, like they do kind of do that with like they acknowledge that like you might not like the motorcycle mini game and you can skip those battles like in subsequent playthroughs.
Yeah, you can with the motorcycle minigame, and that's true. It's just
it's the arms.
Yeah, because the arm's not a minigame at that point, right? It's not like, so we'll see what they do with the future parts of Remake. But circling away from that, moving on to the next topic, how did you feel about the music?
Oh man, I mean, just Who can really say negative things about the music?
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really say anything negative about the music. I feel like the only negative, as he prepares to say something negative about the music,
Oh man.
I feel like the only negative thing I have to say about the music is that in the OG, and it's not even just the music, there's a lot more horror-like elements that were changed and kind of done a bit differently with Remake. The music in OG is a lot creepier with certain parts when you're dealing with like I think it's the track like Who Are You? Or even like certain aspects of like Genova and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just way creepier. And as a big horror fan, that speaks to me. And then when you get to
That's right.
Remake, a lot of the music is so, I don't want to say overproduced in a negative way, but it's so many instruments, so many layers. The style of the music is so different that creepy horror aspect is lost.
I can see that.
You know, but that's, again, it's a small negative because I love the music, you know, but it's like, you know, there is a very obvious thing where it's like, okay, like I have to, if I want to get this vibe, I have to go to OG soundtrack and listen to it for a different feel. And then Remake just does something entirely different. But the music is still phenomenal. Like it deserved every award that it won.
I had one moment in the game that I wish that they had gone a different direction musically, and that is Playfall. Like I feel like when it's happening, it's like this intense like countdown music, and like when you're swinging on the wire. And like it makes sense and it's great, but I really wanted something like heavy and emotional. And then you get that the very next scene when Barrett and, oh my God, like that insane, like, oh, John Bentley is freaking magic. But
yeah,
like
that whole scene, like, cried.
Yeah, absolutely, every time. But like that, so yeah, like it was so much more suitable for that moment, but like I also wanted to cry during Playfall, and I feel like because the music was so adrenaline pumping, like it wasn't like I wasn't feeling the emotional turmoil of thousands and hundreds of people dying, and you know, maybe it's because they didn't, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's fair. Moving away from the music, because honestly, like what, you know, we love the music. There's only so much we can talk about the way we loved it. We're going to dive into the actual story itself and kind of get into the bigger picture here. And we're going to talk about the narrative, the changes, like all of that, because, you know, as we all know, having played the game, you know, chapter 1 was fairly faithful to you know, the bombing mission. And then we get into chapter 2 and it's like very suddenly and very obviously like things have changed. And it's that ripple effect out that we get. And we start to find out that, you know, for the lack of a better term, I think Nader is the one who said it best. You know, Final Fantasy VII Remake is not just a remake. It's a meta sequel to the entire compilation, not even OG. And, you know, that it's very obvious Square Enix has got a vision with this. So
for sure.
Talk about how you felt with, you know, encountering all the changes. You know, we'll pick out like specific ones, some of the big ones, but about the story itself, you know, hit us with it.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm super open to it. I loved it. With seeing Sephiroth like in chapter 2, like right away, like it was like, oh my, like it surprised me first time because I was like, wait, like I obviously knew we were going to see Sephiroth. We'd seen him in the trailers, but like it was like, oh my gosh, like this didn't happen. But like it was so exciting. Like it was that like, oh man. And like also just trying to envision what someone who hadn't played OG would go through, like when that was happening, like he's like this big, tall, intimidating, creepy guy who is like menacingly, but not menacingly talking to, like, I don't know, like he like is like cold and like confident and just like, oh man, it's creepy, right? And I feel like at this point, everybody, well, not everybody, but I feel like
pretty much everybody.
Yeah, if you're playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, you probably know who Sephiroth is, or at least the fact that Sephiroth is the main antagonist.
Like 90% of everybody probably does.
Yeah, and especially now that he's in Smash Brothers, like I feel like it's just you can't not know Sephiroth if you know Cloud, and so. It bothers me when a lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, like he's supposed to be the Jaws storyline, you know, which is what they did in OG. And like, you know, like you don't see the threat until, you know, you absolutely have to. And that was never going to work in Remake because everyone already knows Sephiroth. And so would it even be a Final Fantasy game, like a modern Final Fantasy VII game, if Sephiroth wasn't there? And I think that the way that they sprinkle him in all of the scenes in Remake, like they build on the mystery, they build on the intrigue, because we don't really, like, we have an idea that Cloud has this deep-seated hatred for him. We get an idea that Sephiroth probably killed his mom, and that some crazy shenanigans went down with Sephiroth and Cloud. And there's way more to the story, but they don't ever actually really touch on it. And like, I feel like they amplified it even more. I mean, basically giving Aerith future sight. And like Viz has some awesome theories on Cosmo Canyon Observatory about Aerith and her secrets and such. And her reactions to a lot of things, like when Cloud brings up Sephiroth by name, like it's like, oh my God, like they strongly are hinting at stuff. But like, to the everyday player who maybe hasn't played OG, like it's enough of a breadcrumb trail that like you are going to look back at those moments and be like, oh my God, this is what they were alluding to. Or like, oh my gosh, like this is what the buildup was. And like, this is like, they were doing this the whole time. And we catch up, like we pick up on it because we kind of know, right? But I don't know. I just think it was so well, like, masterfully crafted. Like, I feel like that is the way to do it, and to build up this epic villain who people already have an idea. Like, if you can't create the Jaws situation where he's, you don't show the threat right away. Like, if you can't do that, this is such a great way to do that.
Yeah, it's like trading that unseen threat with the Jaws metaphor, which, I think even the developers have used it. We're not original for using that analogy. But trading that for, okay, now we're just going to make him super intimidating and like, holy crap, right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But trading that mystery for like a new mystery, like, okay, what is he doing? What is this plan? Why is he showing up? There's very obvious things going on, or not very obvious, but like this breadcrumb that you're mentioning with Aerith, with Sephiroth, their connection. What is Sephiroth's connection to Cloud? Like they've traded one thing for another, and we have like an entirely new mystery now. And I think that was a fair trade, considering, they can't redo Jaws in Final Fantasy VII. They can't recapture that.
Well, and that was one of the big things that they talked about, like pre-launch, was like they really wanted to capture the essence and like the feelings that people got when they played 7, and that they wanted to do surprises and they wanted to do things because that was how we played it the first time. Like, they're playing OG, like there were shocking moments and there were big reveals, and like, now that, like, if they just did a 1-for-1 remake, like, we wouldn't have those shocking moments or there's big reveals because we know them all. And so the little changes and like the expansions and like the shifts and the deviations and how things happen, like those captured the feelings and the emotions and like the beats that the original did, just in a different way. And I think that was like, I think that's a huge reason why I'm such a big fan of the story, because like, it is like, even though it's different, it's giving me those same emotions and those same like I mean, I know the big controversy is the ending, and I do remember when, before it came out, there was a little part of me that was hoping that they had spent all of this money marketing that it was only Midgar and that it was actually going to be the full game. Because of that statement of, they said that they wanted to capture the feelings. And I was like, oh, like, because that's in the game, like in OG, like a lot of people, when you play it the first time, like you think it's just Midgar, like, and then you leave Midgar and you're like, oh my
God. There's a whole world.
Right. And it's like this huge, insane, massive moment that's like, this is just beginning. But I feel like without doing it the way where, if they actually did give us the whole game with only marketing Midgar, like, if, outside of doing that, the way that they ended it now was such a great way to capture that feeling, because no one knows what's going to happen now. Like, the whole world is open. It's that what is it? Terrifying freedom, sweet,
Boundless, terrifying.
Yeah, there
freedom.
it is. Yeah,
I love that line.
Yeah, me like, oh man. But like that's exactly the emotion that it is. And it's like, wow, like and
Yeah,
the whole world is open.
Fayer and I have talked pretty extensively about this. That's like, say what you want about Remake and whether you like the changes or didn't like the changes. If they gave us a 1-for-1 remake, we'd have talked about it, but we would have run out of things to talk about fairly quickly. It would have just been like, this is tight. But making the changes that they did, Cosmo Canyon is a great example. You, Kusa, with what you're doing with them is a great example. Like, how many content creators are still have sprouted up, one, because of Remake, but two, are still dissecting Remake. Podcasts, us, we would probably not be doing this had it not been for Remake. And we are still talking about it to this day, and we'll likely still be dissecting these things until the next part comes out. And when it comes out, we'll be doing that same cycle again after it comes out. And we would not have had that happen, that same energy, had it not been for the changes.
I agree 100%.
Changes aside, let's dig into some specific ones. And we're coming up on time. We'll do it a little bit, but we're gonna kind of speed round things. How did you feel about the Whispers?
I thought there's a big connection with the Whispers and the Cries of the Planet, and Viz has some really, really awesome theories about like what the Whispers can do and why they're kind of relevant. And I thought that they were a really interesting and surprising new addition, but also like really, I feel like they still fit into the lore.
I at first thought the Whispers, like I was just like, oh, this is like a convenient metaphor for like us as players trying to make the creators stay on the tracks. But then, as time went on and I thought about it and watched some of these videos, I was like, okay, like it's not so out there that the planet would have, it has weapons. It develops these things as like a defense mechanism for the planet. And as we learned more about the Lifestream via the compilation, like I was like, oh yeah, I guess it does make sense that like the planet would have this idea about fate and destiny. And if it does, and the planet's that sentient, like it's not that far-fetched that it would create entities to protect the time and destiny and things that it perceives as accurate. So like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's that whole thing where humans are actually the virus on the planet. And now it's the antibodies.
Right. So Whispers aside, how did you feel about one of the things that kind of gets brought up a lot is like the Jessie content or the Jessie chapter or Jessie as a whole, the way they really expanded upon her? How did you feel about that?
I loved it. I think that getting to know Avalanche a lot better made it a lot more meaningful. And they were more than just, because in OG Platefall, you're like, oh man. But now in this one, you're like,
so accurate. That's so accurate. Like, oh, okay. Oh man. Well, anyways.
Yeah, right. And then you just move on. And in this one, like, and I mean, again, that scene right after with Barrett, like, it's like, ooh, like you feel it and it hurts because you were supposed to get pizza and like
pizza.
Oh man. Pizza. Right. And so, she got the pizza in the sky instead, and that's terrible.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, this is such a good, bad joke. Oh, I guess she did get pizza.
Oh man.
Oh, man.
Do we need a break to cry?
All right. 5 seconds of silence for Jessie.
Because she's dead,
anyway,
right?
Yeah. I think so.
I'm pretty sure.
I think that's just that 5-second pause because she's dead, right? Oh my God. Anyway.
I mean, like, they're doing the whole, Barrett got stabbed, got brought back.
This is a convenient segue. Thank you.
Wedge and Biggs got brought back and they're more apparent. But Jessie, like, is she staying dead or is she gonna?
I mean, I'm pretty sure Wedge is dead too.
I'm too confident. Like, if Wedge, like, I get that the Whispers basically pushed him out a window, but like, that was like, we didn't even see him fall. There was nothing dramatic. It was just like the screen was black and he screamed. Like, I don't know. I didn't see a body and he dropped from real high on that plate and was fine. I'm not convinced he's dead yet. Just saying.
I mean, I don't know what how it aligns with Viz's theories yet, but I kind of am on the train where I think that the alternate world or alternate timeline is actually just within the live stream. And so I think that Biggs is still actually dead too.
Okay. So and that's kind of what we were going to talk about is like the character deaths. Obviously we had seemingly Wedge came back, and Wedge may or may not be alive, because he did get pushed out a window, even though we didn't even really see him get pushed out the window, but we heard the crack, the black screen, him scream. But Biggs is seemingly alive. We saw Barrett get stabbed and get brought back.
The Barrett thing, really quick, I think was such an awesome reference because originally in development they had planned on, it was Cloud, Barrett, and Aerith as the main party, and they wanted to kill one of them. They knew they couldn't kill Cloud, and there was debate between whether or not it was going to be Barrett or Aerith. And I thought that was such a clever way to reference that. Was it? Did we all did we all expect him to come back to life after that? Yeah, absolutely. But in the moment, it was shocking unless you watched the trailer, and I don't know. I definitely gasped when it happened because I didn't watch the last trailer.
Same. I was surprised when that happened. I was like, oh.
Right. But I was like, wait a minute. And so for a brief moment, you question whether or not they were really going to change it. And it was that shocking, oh my God. But you knew that they wouldn't. But there was that pain in your heart just for a little second because you love him. And I don't know. I thought it was good. And it, like I said, it referenced back to their old development phase. And I feel like that's such an interesting way to do that.
And were you upset that one of the complaints I heard about, but didn't really bother me until I kind of saw the complaints. But how did you feel about it? Because seemingly, because Wedge survives and he helps evacuate so many people and is able to get in front of those guards, it seems like a lot more people survive Platefall than what they do in OG. Now, I'm sure there are people who died in Platefall in this. I'm pretty sure there's NPCs that talk about it when you walk by them.
Yes.
But the impression I got was that more people survived this time than in OG. So how did you feel any particular way about that? Or like I said, Biggs, Wedge, some of these changes with death in the game?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't necessarily think that Biggs is actually alive. But I think, I don't know. It surprised me the very first time, when they're we're going to go back to the bar. And I was like, wait, what? And that was really exciting because, that was something that you always wanted to do in the OG was to go back and see what actually happened. So I thought that was really cool. But I guess it didn't bother me too much. When you went back and you saw that these people had survived because they were NPCs that you were kind of rooting for, really. And not all of them made it. So there were a couple who you don't see again. So you assume that they died and that, it's rough, but it's that's part of it. But I feel like having these people and these familiar faces talking about rebuilding and talking about stuff that was lost, I feel like that is more meaningful from faces that you remember, and because if it's just a random NPC, you don't necessarily pay attention. But with named NPCs that you did talk to and you did quests for earlier, there's a little bit more of a sting.
Yep, I agree. So gonna do the last two last big ones.
Okay.
And it is, of course, it's the ending. The big things are on the ending. So obviously, we're doing the highway chase scene, and that's very memorable. And where we think we're gonna, come to a halt and then look off into the open world, Sephiroth descends, and we find out that we're having an Advent children style fight against Sephiroth and the Harbinger. And so how did you feel about that? Because that was a lot of these changes were obvious changes and were big deals, but they did not hold a candle to the way Sephiroth came down and you fight Sephiroth.
Oh yeah, that was the major deviation. I feel like it was fitting because from the beginning they were marketing this as its own game. This is part one, but it is its own experience. And I feel like without the final chapter, that wouldn't be the case. Can you imagine how disappointing it would be if Motorball was the last boss? What? No, that's so anticlimactic. And to end an experience, I feel like that wouldn't have worked. And sure, they probably could have brought Roche on the scene, and that would have been cool because I did like Roche, but also like that feels a little anticlimactic, especially when the whole time they're building up Sephiroth as this big bad and this mysterious, like, what the heck? And chapter 18 really just solidifies that. And I feel like it's such a great way to end on a cliffhanger with also making it feel complete. Because you fight the big bad at the end and you seemingly win. And then the final cutscene with their fight in the like at the end of the world or whatever, like
Edge
that
of
is
creation.
Yeah, there it is. When like that, like clearly Cloud loses or is not in full power, and so it's like, oh, okay, like we're not done, like that we need to get stronger, and like so it's like, okay, but like you have that confrontation at the end, so it is closing like that arc, like it feels like that was a true end boss, and I feel like the motorcycle fight wouldn't have necessarily felt like that.
I don't disagree with that assessment.
I do think that like when the first time that I played it, I was I was really tired because I had stayed up way too late and I had just gotten to a part. I think I got to the part where you're climbing in the like the ducts like above the bathroom, and I was like, I'm so close to the end, I'm just gonna push through. And
oh my god, the end is so deceptively long.
Yeah.
That last chapter.
Oh man, but I loved it. And like the drum reminded me so much of like Final Fantasy VI, like final dungeon, like where you're changing between parties, and like that just was such a Final Fantasy moment to me, and I loved it. And then the end, like everyone's like, oh, it's like Kingdom Hearts with like the Harbinger, and like I didn't get
Nomura.
Yeah, but I didn't get that at all when I first played it. And I do remember, I mean, that part and the Zack at the end, which I'm guessing is the final question. Yep. I actually refused to talk about it with my roommates for 24 hours after I beat it, because I was like, I need to sit and process how I feel about this. And because
I actually did the same thing.
Yeah, like I was so excited in the moment. And then I also knew that like I didn't fully comprehend what I had just seen. And I also like, I was like crying because I beat it. And like, it was like, I need to assess and to process all of this. And so I didn't talk about it at all until after I had thought about it and sat and through and like really like, you know what? No, like, okay, like the world is open. And I don't know what this means, but I love that. Like I'm so intrigued, and it just makes me want part 2 all the more. That was, and I struggled to admit it to myself that like I feel like this is probably my favorite Final Fantasy game, and I didn't want to admit that because like it's like I didn't want to be blinded by newness, like, oh, I just played it, so of course it's my favorite. And I didn't want to ever say that because it's like, well, that seems so obvious. Literally after I beat it, like I wanted to play it again, and I started hard mode right away. Like, well, after the 24 hours of processing, I started it. And then after I beat hard mode, like I was like, okay, I'm going to 100% the play log because I already got all, and get the platinum. And then after I got the platinum, I begged my friend to let me play on her account so I could get the platinum a second time. And so like,
I do it on mine, please.
Yeah, I will if you want me to. But that's, the more and more that I like, even after time kept going, I just want to keep going back to it. And so that's like, it's like, well, there's clearly some magic here, at least for me. It resonates with me so well. And like, I don't know, like there's something there. And so like, I guess I do strongly think that it's probably my favorite Final Fantasy game.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's funny because I love how complete polar opposite your not final, but your words about Remake are in juxtaposition from Nader, and we just interviewed him a couple of days ago. So it's going to be great. But I struggled with the Zack cutscene, and when it was realized that Zack was alive, because one of the things, and I don't know if it's my fault or if it's the game's fault. There's probably some overlap there, but I missed a lot of the visual cues that the game was giving us about things that were going on, like Sephiroth absorbing the whispers in the last fight. The color purple around Sephiroth after you defeat the Harbinger, and it's like, was Sephiroth being held prisoner by the Harbinger and we defeated him and like we released Sephiroth? Like, was that a prison? And then the bag of chips with Zack, that was a different breed of dog from Stamp. Like, I missed all of these visual cues. So like the ending of my first time,
we have smooth brains.
Yeah, I was just like, I don't understand what's going on, because I was missing these visual cues. I was so wrapped up in the emotion. Yeah. And all I could see when Zack survived was, how is Zack alive? That undercuts all of Cloud's story. They're just going to bring him back, and he's alive now somewhere. And, come to find out, we're potentially dealing with like alternate timelines or like branchings and stuff like that. And we don't really know what's going on with Zack anyway. So who even knows if it's an alternate timeline? We don't know. Right. That's the entire point. But it was actually my partner when I sat down, because she was there with me when I beat it, and she was talking me through and like basically entertaining the logical side of my brain, going like, Zack is an important character. He's barely in OG. There's an entire compilation. People love him. They couldn't just do him dirty like that. They have to like give him a lot of time, and what a beautiful way by bringing him back in some capacity for like people to really get time with this character that they wouldn't otherwise. Like, this is the pin in the hat for Final Fantasy VII. And like, so and so like talked about it, and then I saw all these theories, and I was like, oh, this might be a different timeline, et cetera, et cetera. And so like, but initially I was just like, oh my God, how can they do this to me? But more importantly, how could they do this to Cloud was my whole stance. But anyway,
my very first assumption was that they were just showing the original flashback. Like, it didn't click to me right away that he survived. Like, I just thought, like, because in OG, if you see the Zack cutscene, like, it's like 2 Shinra soldiers who come up and like shoot him on a cliff. And I'm like, oh, like, okay, like that's what, like, he, like, I don't know, like, there's all of these soldiers. And I was like, okay, like, cool. Like, he fought them off, and now he's exhausted, and they're going to kill him on the cliff. Like, and they're just not going to show that part. They're just introducing Zack right away, like, to these new people. And like, so that was my initial thought. And then I realized, I was like, wait a minute. That's not how the scene played out in Crisis Core. So,
what is this?
Yeah. Okay. And then again, all of those theories, and Viz has some crazy ones. So, that's definitely, opened that, like, well, where are they going, and how is this going to happen? And like, I still have the theory that he's actually, in my head canon right now, he's actually still dead, and we're just going to experience his journey through the live stream. But
which is a valid theory.
Yeah, I feel like
they're all valid.
I mean, true.
True, fair. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that would be a really interesting direction, because we get to it be an excuse to see all of the people and all the characters that we know that die and that we love, but also keep Aerith in the mix afterward, and really play out Maiden Who Travels the Planet, and especially because they're showing that we don't have to control Cloud the whole time. So maybe there's a world where after things happen, we have not a side story, but part of the story where we're experiencing that story.
I mean, you could be right, but at the same time, like part of the big heart crushing thing about Aerith dying was like her being gone. And I don't know how I feel about if she's like obviously if we see little snippets of her like interacting, or like visions and stuff, or like Cloud's memory or whatever, like that's one thing. But if like we're full on controlling her in the live stream, like I don't know how I feel about that. I want to feel that loss.
Yeah, I think
I could be a glutton for punishment.
But I also think that, like, I mean, Advent Children is proof that she's not actually gone. I mean, even the end of OG is proof that she's not actually gone.
Yeah, but Advent Children was fine because that to me, that's that whole, like, she's just showing up in little snippets, and I'm fully prepared for that type of thing, like little glimpses of her or little things of dialogue and stuff. Like, I'm not saying never come back, but like if we're full on controlling her in the live stream and doing things like it will lessen the loss for me, but maybe I'll feel differently when I play it.
I mean, I don't think it's actually going to happen, but I still think it could be emotional if, like, especially if it's like the idea where you're controlling her and she can't actually interact with the rest of the team.
That could be hurtful. They could literally set you up a player just to hurt you.
Yeah.
She's just Ghost Aerith following around. Listen to me, you idiots.
Right. And so I don't know. I think that could be, like trying really hard or wanting to like communicate, but you only have like certain, opportunities to do so, like, like drips of water or something, like crazy. Yep. So they could definitely play that up, but I don't think that's the route they're going to go. I still think she's going to die. I do. You can't. I do think that we have a lot of promise, and Intermission really proves that there is that promise. I mean, the combat feels so much more fluid with Yuffie, and the synergized attacks is like, if they don't do that with the main team, like, what were they thinking? Like, that is the coolest thing that ever happened. I
absolutely believe that Intermission was a test bed for that mechanic for part 2.
100%.
See, the combat felt better because you only controlled one character.
No.
I'm bringing it back. I loved Intermission's combat 100 times more than the base game of Remake. I loved it.
My only complaint was that I couldn't switch over to Sonnen.
I didn't want to control him. He was just my heal bot. You'd stand over there and do attacks with me.
I like to play healer, so maybe that's part of it too.
You're a glutton for punishment.
Some people love the support roles, and that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, so we gotta wrap this one up. Kuta, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving us your opinions and takes from the
yes
from Remake. I'm gonna leave it with one final question for you, and it's gonna be a hard question. What would be your favorite change or takeaway from Remake now that you've processed and sat on it for a while? What is the most meaningful? What's your favorite?
That is a hard one. I think my favorite takeaway, is just the expansion of the characters. Like, I feel like we really, like, not only did these feel like the characters that we knew and love and from OG, but I feel like we got to see even more sides of them, and Yuffie included, in Intermission. Like, I feel like they are proving again and again that they know these characters just as well as we think we do, and like that there's still so much more depth to them, and that, like, we haven't even scratched the surface in half of their stories. And like, I don't know, I feel like I love the characters all the more and even more and all over again at the same time. So I think
that's so well said.
Right?
Nailed that. All right. So Kuta, again, thank you for joining us. Where can everyone find you if they want to hear more of your lovely voice or watch you stream?
Yeah, well, you can hear my voice. I'm the primary voiceover for Cosmo Canon Observatory. We are, again, on YouTube. We are a Final Fantasy VII Remake analysis channel. I basically read over Vizuzoth. He makes crazy awesome theories and has insane in-depth knowledge of the entire compilation, and just really awesome theories that you should definitely check out. On top of that, we also have a series, the Pulse of the Lifestream, and that is kind of a recap of news that has happened. It's not necessarily breaking news for Final Fantasy VII Remake, but more so a one-stop shop if you want to know like what all has been going on lately. And I am one of the co-hosts for that series. On top of that, I also have my own personal stream on Twitch. I'm just at Kutakuma. And I've been streaming through Final Fantasy X, trying to get the platinum trophy for all of the numbered Final Fantasy games. And there's my dog. which you can see Jade. That Jade is my dog. You can see her on my streams. I have Jade Cam, and she's absolutely adorable. So
That's amazing.
Yes.
I will provide links to all of these platforms and locations in the show description. Fair, where can everybody see your beautiful face?
Well, I wouldn't call it beautiful, but you can find my face. I am at Feyerbrand on Twitter, Instagram. Doesn't have posts yet, but they're coming. I am also Feyerbrand on Twitch as well as YouTube. And I think that's all I got.
All right. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, subscribe. Please, tell your dog.
Yes.
Please subscribe and review us on your podcatcher platform of choice. But if you do have access to Apple Podcast, please review us there. It helps with the algorithms. And check us out at magusbrothers.com. We have links to all of our socials and streaming services there. Or not streaming services, but where you can listen to the podcast.
Podcast streaming.
Podcast streaming. There you go.
That's
there you go.
right.
That works. I said streaming and I just pictured visual and I was like, nope, that's not right. Anyway, thank you for joining this episode. And again, thank you, Kuta, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening, listeners. Bye.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Bye, everyone.